Welcome to Trailblazers and Coffee, your podcast for elevating women in leadership, with your hosts Dr. Christina Pecora and Dr. Abby Brown.
Hi, listeners. Just a note that our guest this week talks about suicide and suicidal ideation. If you or someone you know is seeking this way out, help is available. Call 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, available all over the United States in English and Spanish. Help is available 24 hours a day. Speak with someone today.
Blazers and Coffee, Chit Chat, episode 2. So, Abby, what's in your coffee mug today?
Oh, sister, you know what's in my coffee mug. You made it for me. Some bourbon and cider.
Yes. Yes.
This stuff is so delicious.
We both have bourbon and cider in our coffee mugs today because it is a chilly day here in Chicago.
Yeah, freezing.
And we need it.
Absolutely.
It's necessary. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. What did you call it? It's a hot toddy?
Hot toddy. It's
More
a
or
kind
less.
of hot toddy, right?
More or less.
Right, but that's good inspiration for the next hot toddy, which we'll do more traditional. What's your blazer mood today?
Oh, that's such a good one. I was thinking because it's so cold that it's got to be my very flaming hot red J. Crew blazer, the one that's made of wool.
Yes.
And it's just to die for. And I think I mentioned that I have it in 4 other different colors. The black and navy and camel, right, and the red. How about you? What's yours?
When you find the right one,
you buy it in
you
bulk.
buy it in every color. I'm also feeling actually a J. Crew blazer of mine, which is gray herringbone, and it's just tailored kind of like a traditional racing, like a horse riding jacket, but it's got this fun frilly pop collar.
Yeah, giddy up.
Love it. Love it. Feeling a little avant-garde today, I guess.
Cool. In this episode, we talk a lot about autism and mention the separate diagnosis of Asperger's. So historically, autism and Asperger's syndrome were considered separate. You'll hear these conditions used interchangeably out in the world. So a kiddo with mild Asperger's likely experienced difficulties with social interactions and fitting in with their peers. Autism involved a wider range of symptoms than Asperger's and a greater level of impairment. In addition to difficulties interacting with others, children diagnosed with autism often displayed delayed language skills, lack of flexibility in their daily routines, repetitive behaviors, among other things. However, both diagnoses now fall under one condition called Autism Spectrum Disorder, also known as ASD. So, as you listen today, you have a little bit of mental health background and context to consider.
Welcome, listeners, to Trailblazers and Coffee, our second episode. How exciting, Abby. Ooh, Today in our studio, we have with us Sonia Chand, runner, therapist, and advocate. Sonia, welcome. We're so happy to have you today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So we first met running with a Chicago Distance Runners Association. I was just wondering, are you still running?
I'm getting back into it. I had a knee injury that I'm still kind of recovering from, but I'm getting back into it. I had to pull out of the New York City Marathon last November.
Oh, shame.
At mile 12. And to say, but and I was struggling. But one thing I will always remember is how supportive the crowd was. They stayed back. They treated me like I was an elite runner. I mean, I honestly felt like, oh my God, this was what it must feel like to be a front of the pack runner, right?
Oh my goodness.
It really felt like that. It's like, because they treated everybody the same. They didn't care if you were first or last, and they kept their, and that really was so emotional for me. But I am going to be going back to New York to finish.
Oh, good for you.
To redo, because that was supposed to be my 15th marathon overall that I've ever done. But I'm going to go back in November, and I'm super excited to go back, and I'm going to be running with the charity again, the Autism Speaks. I've run several marathons with that charity with
Awesome.
Chicago and New York. So
Awesome.
I'm going to go back and do that. I'm so excited to do that. So I'm building back up slowly. So if people see me on the path now, people will be like, what? But it's a slow process because I'm practically starting from scratch again. But you know what? I have to keep reminding myself that this is okay too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have to say that whenever we see Sonia on the path, she is the most just avid cheerleader out there for anyone. And everybody knows Sonia on the running path here in Chicago. Yeah, it's great. You're a real inspiration.
Oh, thank you. It's a nice thing. The running community, that's what's great about them is that, you know what, everybody is it's an inclusive community.
Yeah. So inclusive and so welcoming. So again, welcome. We're so happy to have you here.
Welcome.
Yes, we'll talk about running a little bit later. But what we're mainly here to talk about today is that you have released a book.
Yes.
And as I said in the intro, you're an advocate, and you're specifically an advocate for people on the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
So now you're very open about your own diagnosis and doing a quick Wikipedia lookup of you. You were diagnosed with Asperger's at age 20, is that correct?
Correct. Back in 2002. I was a sophomore in college at that point, and I finally got diagnosed with the right thing. Because growing up, I was diagnosed like a learning disabled, ADHD, and I think a lot of times too. If we look back at so I was born in 1982, all right, and then you look at like what people knew about autism really back in the 80s, right? In the 80s and 90s, and I don't think people really understood what autism was, especially how it relates to females. Okay.
Right.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the later part of the 80s, you had that movie Rain Man come out.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody started thinking about that. They started branding autism with that, right?
Mm.
And even though, don't get me wrong, it was a very good movie and they had really good acting in the sense, right? They had top actors. I'm not going to disregard a whole piece of work.
Sure.
But it didn't really accurately portray what autism is, right? But that movie did not tell you the story about autism because not everybody, on the spectrum will remember somebody's number or will be able to count how many toothpicks fell on the floor, right?
Right. That was more about savant.
That was more savant. Mm-hmm. And like anybody else, people on the spectrum have their strengths and challenges like everybody else, right? And so not everybody who's on the spectrum is a savant.
Right. So what was life like for you before you were diagnosed?
Very confusing. Here's the thing, as a child, like going to school and stuff, I always was in a world of my own. I didn't really, socialize with anybody. I just kind of was, I didn't really know about friendship. Like I used to see people connecting and stuff like that when I was very young, but I didn't really understand like friendships. And I think it started to hit more in like first, second grade, when I used to see like people having, birthday parties or things of that nature. And I remember, it would be very lonely because I was not able to connect with anybody and I didn't have the social skills. And if anything, my efforts to try to connect with people kind of drove people more away. Because I would, call them a lot and people would be like, what do you call me for, and these are people that when I look back, I was like, we never really bonded at school. I've been told, not to, to just leave people alone and stuff like that. And then, so mind you, first, second grade, I went to a parochial school because my parents thought it would be a good place to send me because they went to some Christian schools in India, even though they're not Christian, okay?
Sure.
So then I failed second grade.
Oh.
But, I swear to God, people ask, they go, Sonia, how do you fail second grade? I said, maybe I am a savant after all. I cracked the code on how to fail second grade. No, but the teacher she was wretched. B word. Okay, so anyway.
You can say it here.
Yeah.
We don't care.
Okay, great. She was a wretched bitch.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, she was, and she was here's the thing with her, she was very intolerant, right? So she wanted people to walk the straight and narrow. And if you've ever seen that movie, Dead Poets Society, right?
Of course.
Oh, I love that movie.
So
but
good.
you saw how regimented that school was for the students
Yes.
and what kind of standards.
And what it drove them to, those
Yes.
students.
Yes, and that's exactly how she was.
Oh boy.
You know, she was very much of that mindset. So she was very regimented, and you know, I remember one day in class, she asked us to pull out some worksheet or do something, and I didn't have it because I didn't have my desk. I couldn't find it.
Because that's what happens when we're kids. Yeah.
No, she looked at my desk. She came over and really picked up the desk. Because you know those desks, how it was like, you had like a little like a slot where you just put your books and folders. Mm-hmm. She looked over at the desk, picked it up like it was a weight in a gym, and threw the contents on the floor. And I remember looking around, and I remember one girl's face in particular. She was like mouth like agape, flabbergasted, complete look all around, because people were like, even though they didn't say anything, but I think so there were some people that were going, what is happening here?
Right.
And I had to go on my knees and pick up material in front of the whole class.
Of course.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You were so young.
This is what 7, 8-year-old kids, right? Because I was 7 years old at the time. And she did that, and it's like, you know what? I mean, what teacher? But you know what? That goes to show how out of touch, really, she was.
Yes,
you know?
A lot of people are. Yes.
You know, and if I had to look back at it, it's very much a behavior of somebody who struggles with some sort of something. Yeah. Right.
So her own struggle, and then like compounded by the fact that at that time there just wasn't a full picture of how this can look for a young girl.
Right.
And how these symptoms can show up, and how this can look different across the board. Boys, girls.
Right. You know, we moved towns after 2nd grade. Thank God. I was like, thank God, right? But that's what I thought at first, thank God. But it ended up going from basically one fire pit to the next. Really.
Oh, gosh.
Because, you know what, and, you know, because the friendship, like the social issues never got better, right?
Right.
And I was acting out a lot in school, too, as retaliation to how I was getting treated.
Of course.
And, of course, so that that made things worse. You know, I thought I was making progress when I made some friends in 3rd grade, but then those friends didn't stick around because I used to cry all the time at school, and meltdowns, you know, things like that. So they didn't stick around. And then it was not until 5th grade when things really hit the fan at that point, because we went on a field trip to a camping ground. The whole purpose of that trip was you were to learn how pioneers, like the early settlers, lived. So you do some camp activities and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
And then in the nighttime, there was camp skits that people were assigned groups to do.
Of course.
And at this point, you know, people had made it clear they didn't want me around their group, you know? So I was kind of walking around by myself, and I started screaming, I hate myself, because I was so frustrated.
Oh.
And then one guy who I had a crush on at the time turned around. He goes, hey, Sonia, do you want to kill yourself? I said, yeah. And I didn't think about what that meant.
Oh, God.
I didn't even know. Like, I've heard of what suicide was, but I didn't really know what it was, if that makes sense. People started, like, harassing me about it at school, you know. In the sense of they just kept asking and asking and asking.
Provoking.
They wanted to ask, you know, like, keep asking, provoking. But, you know, I remember that night when after I screamed it and I was told to shut up, basically, in indirect words. I saw the night sky, and that's what I thought. I saw, like, you know, the sky, you know, it was like a full moon, and stars were out. You know, you could see the whole, like, solar system practically that night, right? Sure. What it felt. And I just, I looked at the sky. I'm like, you know what? I could live here. I could live with the stars, because that's where I thought people go anyway, to go be with the planets. That's what I thought, at least. And, but it really, I just wanted the calm to the storm, and it just didn't get better in middle school either. It just continued.
Wow. So there was just a lot of misunderstanding.
Lots of misunderstanding.
Your early life.
Lots. And you know what it was also, and you know, I needed like social skills training. I needed, you know, emotional regulation. I needed sensory regulation training, right? Or coping skills. I needed more of those. I also needed to understand, you know, empathy building, right? All those things that, you know, we think about when we work with somebody who's on the spectrum, right? Like, I know I have, and I'm pretty sure both of you have met clients who are on the spectrum.
For sure.
You know, those are things that, you know, like, people need to be explained, right? Like, certain things, they need to be explained and treated with compassion instead of being treated as a problem.
Right.
Yes.
You know, and throughout my life, I was treated as the problem. So when I started going to, but I was forced then to go to a psychiatrist because I got so depressed at school.
Sure.
And then I started talking about suicide a great ton, and then making up these stories of fake attempts I've done and stuff. And then I had to take a 2-week leave of absence, and then I got the letter to come back, and then that's when the school decided I was not fit to be in their school district, and they wanted to kick me out and send me to a school for troubled children, basically.
Wow.
And then my parents had to fight, and they had to hire help from a psychiatrist to fight for my rights. And then basically the price that I had to pay to stay in that school is I was put under restriction. So basically, for all practical purposes, it was like you're getting treated like a prisoner in plain clothes. So I went to school. I had to check in at the resource. They used to call it the resource room, which was a special education room. I had to wait for 5 minutes until after the bell has rung and all the kids went to class. Then I was escorted by either the paraprofessionals or the special ed teacher herself to go and pick up my books, take my books to class. You know, like you do your passing period, you know, the typical what you do during passing periods at that time. Get my books, whatever, go to class. Then 5 minutes before the bell rang, I'd have to be picked up and then escorted back to the resource room. I was not allowed to eat lunch in the cafeteria. And the reasoning for all that, they wanted to get me off the minds of people.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
that's a gut punch. My God.
to get me off people's minds for a bit. So they're like, oh yeah, this is the way we do it. But here's the thing. Everybody notices when somebody walks in late.
Yes.
Everybody notices when people leave early. Everybody notices, you know, like.
Sonia, did anyone ever ask you what you needed at that time?
No, they said that this was to help me.
So they knew what was best for you without asking you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they thought they knew the answer, and the answer was to treat somebody like a prisoner in plain clothes, so that it's like in many ways, it's like you committed a crime, and now you're paying the price for it, but the punishment doesn't fit the crime, right? So
the definition of crime doesn't even fit.
Right. The definition of crime doesn't fit, right?
Of course, the managing of your behaviors.
So you get a diagnosis of Asperger's at 20. Who diagnoses you? What was your experience? We would love to know, just because, you know, and as psychologists and, you know, we hear a lot about autism among men and young boys, but a lot less so when it comes to young women, girls. So how did that come up, and what did you learn? What was that experience like?
Okay, so the whole thing came about was, so in my junior year of high school, I had switched, I started seeing a different therapist. Before my earlier high school years, I remember the therapist I even saw beforehand used to point out that my social skills didn't match up to other people my age. And she used to make some pointers, but she never really thought to investigate for autism. But if anything, that therapist kind of crossed her boundaries a little bit by trying to facilitate friendships for me with particularly one classmate in particular. And, you know, and she would get feedback about me from other classmates and would tell me what they said without divulging names, which I thought was unprofessional, right? As everybody knows, as a therapist, even if you do see people who go to the same school district, or you know people who go to a certain school, you're not supposed to divulge, oh, I know this person.
It's just too easy to figure it out,
Yes.
who it is.
Agreed.
If
Exactly.
you give even just a couple identifiers, right?
And, you know, and the thing is, she you know, she never told me who they were, but she'd be like, oh, just start being on the lookout of who might be starting to be nice to you as a way to divulge. You know, she's like, oh, you'll see, you know, like make those kind of hints. And it's like, you know what, that's unprofessional, right? So, well, what ended up happening is that person that she tried to facilitate a friendship with didn't treat me very well. And so she wasn't the best of friend to me, you know, and she used to keep asking me about why I did what I did in my past and things like that. And it didn't make me feel good. I was very insecure at the time.
Right, they were still making you the problem.
Right, and you know, she kept asking questions about it. And I remember the therapist did intervene when I told her, and she did say, okay, I'm going to tell her, you know, and she did tell her not to ask me anymore, okay? And but I just feel like a lot of things about me got twisted, and what ended up happening is that therapist lashed out at me and said I was not worthy of being a friend or having as a friend, and just made fun of me, stuff like that. And so I stopped seeing her, and then I actually went and saw another therapist my second semester of junior year, and I stayed with her throughout my senior year just for that support, because I was so lonely and so depressed and lonely and angry. I had a lot of anger at that time.
Of course.
You know? And so she helped me realize how angry I was and helped me work through some of my anger, but, you know, also helped me understand my pain too. So she did a good job, but in my freshman year of college, I stayed local before branching out to the main campus, and this is when she noticed then too, you know, because she noticed I was still having problems. It's, you know, she thought that maybe some of the social things might get better, but I remember even when I was my senior year of high school, she started saying, you know, Sonia, I think you should get psychologically tested to see what's going on. Then after my freshman yes, and then my freshman year of college, I got psychologically tested, and they referred it then to a neuropsychologist to confirm. And so she was a smart lady in that sense, because she knew there was more of the story that was going on, certain behaviors, certain things I was doing, certain ways of processing.
Did things make sense once there was a label put to it, or not?
Oh, absolutely. It's like a blindfold went off.
Oh.
Because it's like, you know, you spend your first 20 years navigating a maze in a blindfold, basically.
Yes.
Then the blindfold gets taken off, but here's the thing. You're deep in the trenches of the maze, and you don't even know how you got there. You know, and it's like, okay, you're trying to find your way out now. And so that's what it felt like. But it made a lot of sense, and I'm like, you know what? I get it finally. Because it's, you know, people used to talk about autism briefly I mean, I've heard that word when I was in high school, because people used to talk about it for like presentations, because I took psych in high school. You know, I took an advanced placement psych course, and one girl was going to do a presentation of autism, and I was like, what is that? Because I've heard of it, and I couldn't put, you know, a definition to it.
Sure.
But then when they used that former term of Asperger, I did so much research then on it after, and, you know, and I feel like, you know, everything made sense the more I also researched it, because finally I was like, oh my God, this was me when I was reading stuff.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds pretty powerful.
So before we started recording today, Sonia and I were chit-chatting a bit about her book, which we just really want to highly, highly recommend. And I had asked you a bit about, when did you start writing the book? You said you started writing it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So what kind of, at that time, where were you in the journey of, you know, getting that diagnosis? What was the intention behind starting a book? Or were you just kind of journaling and writing, or just getting your thoughts down? Was the whole plan from the get-go to write a book? Pick one of those questions. I asked a lot of questions. But we'd just love to hear about how your journey with this book came to be.
Oh, absolutely. So back in 2005, I went with my parents to a book fair in Chicago, and, you know, I was like, okay, you know, maybe I'll just go buy a couple books, maybe listen to some music, get a drink, right? Like, things you'd expect out of a festival, you know, in summertime in Chicago.
Absolutely.
And we were not living in the city at the time, and so we come in, and one thing I was not prepared for was the overwhelming sense of empowerment, because the authors there that were selling their books were sharing their personal narratives, right? And sharing their stories of like war and trauma and what they've had to overcome, and turning their mess into a message, right? Like whatever thing, right? And I've heard this phrase before, so it's kind of, I've heard people use this term, turn your mess into a message.
That's amazing. I've
never
never heard it before. That's
yes.
so inspirational.
Yep.
Yes, I've heard this before at one of the conferences I've attended, and and I can't remember exactly who said it, but it's not something I made up, I promise. Or pain into purpose, I've heard that as well. But like, people were really they're transforming their narratives in their writing and sharing with people, right? Yep. And I felt like, you know what, if they could share with their stories with other people and what that was like for them, why can't I share mine? You know what, I wanted to help others, you know, who are on the spectrum, and help others dispel the myth, right? These myths that, you know what, if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to be liked. No, because life doesn't work that way, you know? Life doesn't.
Well, an autism spectrum occurs across gender, and our podcast is really tailored toward women. We'd like to hear from you any advice that you have, both for just anyone who's on the spectrum, anyone who is neuroatypical, anyone who has suspicions that maybe they fall on the spectrum somewhere. What's your advice for them as they begin to kind of figure out what's next? How do I navigate this?
You know, when you're figuring out in the sense of, let's say, what career path do you want to go down, for example, find out what is your passion, really, and work with that. Because oftentimes when you have a passion or interest in something and you can find work that integrates what you're passionate about or what you like and what you have interest in, that's kind of where things begin to catapult, you know. And I feel like, you know, if you're on the spectrum too, also understanding it's okay to be different and it's okay to embrace your differences, because, and also this too, and I know this is going to sound really kind of dark, but it's okay if not many people like you and if you don't get along with everyone. Like, for example, you know, let's say you go to a conference, for example, and you only connect with maybe 2 people, whereas other people are working up rooms and they got all these people, you know. It's okay if maybe you only connect with 2 people, right?
Yeah.
You know, and also get used to this idea, because a lot of times it's lonely, right? So it's okay, you know, just get used to the idea of being alone, you know, that it's okay to feel how you feel, right? And just try to make something beautiful out of your situation.
That is such a wonderful sentiment.
Oh,
and
thank you.
I think so needed and so important. And I think it's not only for people on the autism spectrum. I think as a leader and as a woman leader, there are a lot of lonely times when people are questioning you or not supporting you. What advice do you have for other women who dare to lead or advocate in the way that you're trying to do?
Just continue to focus on the bigger picture. It is lonely when you're a woman and a leader, and I feel like women are each other's worst enemies sometimes.
They can be.
You know, I feel like this. You know, the other day, I don't know if you follow this account, but like, I was on Instagram and Dr. Shafali had come on, you know, it said something, and I really resonated with this. She's an amazing, I think she's a therapist too, amazing person. She said, I love what her content she puts out, and she said something along the lines of, okay, we all know about the male patriarchy, but I'm going to put out a unpopular opinion about how women also tear each other down.
Yes.
Right? Especially when we're one-upping each other and when we're, you know, trying to compete, make a competition with one another, right? Instead of supporting one another. You know, and that's, you know, so this is also where I feel the loneliness also comes in, because when you're a woman leader, you know, it's like you're trying to break the molds, right? But then at the same time, it's hard to get the right kind of support from the right people.
Absolutely.
You know?
You need to find the right community.
You have to find the right
hard
community.
It's hard enough.
It's hard.
And to not have the support of women alongside you.
One thing I do know about this, you know, and so for me, like what I like to do, how I like to advocate also, and how I like to amplify voices, is I have a podcast called On the Spectrum with Sonia.
Oh,
Perfect. Self-promotion. Go for it. Tell us about it.
this is what we're doing. We're elevating.
Yes.
So basically, On the Spectrum with Sonia, I talk about autism spectrum, mental health, and I highlight stories of anybody who's overcome any adversity, so that we can leave listeners feeling connected and filled with hope and encouragement and inspired, especially in a world that tries to continuously leave us feeling disconnected, right? And my whole goal is, you know what, we talk about a variety of things, but then at the same time, we, out of the variety of stories we share, you know, one thing I want people to, you know, have is that feeling of, you know what, everybody has something or goes through some kind of pain in their life. But what it looks like for everyone is different, you know? And understanding that, you know what, if you feel like you're having a bad day or if you feel like you're having a bad time, well, guess what? Somebody else is also probably feeling that way too, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so that's why I, you know, but I also advocate, you know, I had people on the autism spectrum come on my show. I'm having more guests come on my show.
Nice.
And you two ladies will come on my show.
Thank you. So Sonia, can you tell us a little bit about where to buy your book, how to look for it online, and so that the people who are listening to this can grab a copy?
So my book is called Dropped in a Maze, My Life on the Spectrum from Outcast to Outstanding. It details, you know, some of what I shared today, but it talks about also lessons I've learned along the way, gives like tips and tricks to people. This book is available on Amazon or online on like Strand Books, Barnes & Noble online. So any of those places you can order from there.
Fantastic. Awesome.
And we just got signed copies, so I'm pretty excited.
I know, I can't wait to read it.
Me too.
And people can also feel free to reach out to me, Chand_Sonia, CHAND_SONIA on Instagram.
Fantastic. Great.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Oh, Sonia, thank you so much.
So we've got, we like to surprise our guests.
Oh,
with
right, the
a
surprise.
And actually, I didn't even get a chance to talk to Abby about the surprise this time. But we would love to just make a donation in the name of Trailblazers and Coffee to whatever charity you would like. Maybe one that sponsors.
Oh, I love this.
Maybe one that sponsors your
Take the money. Take it.
Or whatever. And, you know, like, it's not going to be anything too extravagant. But to what charity can we donate in your name?
Sure. So Autism Speaks Team Up.
Team Up.
Yeah, Team Up.
Okay. And is this the charity that you typically run for?
Yes.
Okay.
And so that would be amazing.
Thank you so much for sharing so much of you with us today.
Well, thank
Sonia.
you for having me here.
Yeah,
Oh my
really,
God, this
so
is
lovely to meet you.
In this week's Coffee Break for the Brain, I'm going to be telling you about some stuff I learned in an article I read called Americans Need to Party More in the Atlantic. And just like the title, it's so interesting. It talks about how people these days are just not gathering in large groups. And it totally makes sense. You know, you think about COVID and we were isolated and staying in our kind of immediate bubbles, in our pods. And yes, we still have illnesses and sicknesses and things that we need to keep a lookout for. However, times have shifted and we can kind of think about expanding ourselves socially a little bit more. People continue to feel pretty isolated and alone. And interestingly enough, only 4.1% of Americans attended or hosted a social event on average starting in 2023. So I also found it interesting that vendors like people who sell balloons and disposable plates and other things like that, they're losing money because people just aren't hosting. The article talks about something called diffusion of responsibility, which is basically like everybody wants to attend parties, but nobody wants to host them. And so in the spirit of Coffee Break for the Brain and thinking about how we can kind of push ourselves, I want you to think about, might you host? Might you bring people together? There are ways that we can celebrate just our shared interests with people, and it doesn't have to be a birthday or some major holiday, but it can just be bringing people together to play board games or watch a movie or go for a walk or sharing some food together. I think we all are craving it. Somebody's got to be the one to organize it. Maybe it will be you.
For more information on today's guest, check out the show notes for this episode. Thanks for joining us.